It usually starts in silence. You're not doing anything wrong. You're lying in bed, scrolling, breathing, and then it hits. A flicker, a whisper, then a flood. You replay that conversation again, the one that ended hours ago but refuses to rest. Maybe you laughed too loud. Maybe you said too little. Maybe they noticed the pause, the stutter, the way your eyes searched for the right words but never found them. Suddenly, you're not just remembering, you're reliving, re-editing, reshaping, repunishing. Your brain doesn't ask for permission. It barges in like an interrogator, not a friend. This is the loop, the mental theater of what-ifs and should-haves. And no, it's not logic. It's not insight. It's fear, wearing the mask of preparation. You think you're being cautious, but really you're bracing for pain. You're not overanalyzing because you care too much. You're doing it because your nervous system never learned to feel safe in stillness. You're trying to pre-feel the heartbreak, pre-sense the failure, preempt the shame. This isn't thinking. It's a self-defense mechanism disguised as strategy. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's what overthinking does. It tricks you into believing that your suffering is productive. But it isn't. It's repetition, without resolution. You mistake the loop for learning, but it never actually teaches, only terrifies. And so the storm continues, not because you're broken, but because your mind never learned to rest without scanning for threats. You've become fluent in anticipation, but illiterate in inner peace. This is not weakness, it's a wound. You didn't ask to become this way, but when you were younger, you learned something, not through words, but through reactions, that certain emotions were unsafe. Not dangerous in the way a fire is, but dangerous in the way they made people pull away, dismiss you, punish you, ignore you. You cried. You were told to toughen up. You hesitated. They called you lazy. You spoke your truth. And suddenly you were disrespectful, ungrateful. Too much. So you adjusted. You stopped expressing and started rehearsing. You started scanning every situation like a battlefield, not because there were bullets, but because there once were. And now, you live as if every silence might explode. This is what overthinking is. Not a flaw in your brain, but a strategy that once kept you emotionally safe. To overthink is to control. To control is to prevent pain. And when pain felt unmanageable, control became your only option. But here's the paradox no one warns you about. You became so skilled at anticipating chaos that calmness now feels like a setup. Peace feels suspicious, like the moment just before the storm, like a room too quiet to trust. You start looking for the problem before it even exists, not because you're paranoid, but because unpredictability was once a threat you couldn't afford. Now your nervous system is wired not for joy, but for vigilance. You expect the betrayal, the ghosting, the sudden shift in tone. And so your mind becomes your personal watchtower, always on alert, always scanning, always tired. Zeno of Citium once said, "Man conquers the world by conquering himself." But what happens when the battlefield is within? When the very thoughts meant to protect you begin to imprison you? And now you're stuck between two versions of you. One that wants to trust the present, and one that never got the chance to trust the past. This is not a mindset issue. It's a survival imprint. You're not dramatic, you're conditioned, and until you name this pattern, you'll keep confusing fear with logic. You'll keep calling hypervigilance intuition. And worst of all, you'll keep mistaking exhaustion for failure. But you are not failing. You are surviving beautifully, skillfully, endlessly. And maybe now it's time to stop surviving and start healing. Eventually, it stops being about the situation. It's not just that you said something awkward, it's that you are awkward. Not just that you made a mistake, but that you are the mistake. The loop gets personal. At first, the mind replays the moment, but over time, it stops analyzing the event. and starts analyzing your worth. The language changes from "what happened" to "what's wrong with me." This is where overthinking becomes something darker, more insidious, more permanent feeling. Psychologists call this cognitive distortion, where your mind twists reality into a funhouse mirror. Every reflection makes you feel smaller, uglier, less worthy. But emotionally, this has another name: shame. You don't just feel embarrassed, you feel defective, not "I did something wrong," but "I am wrong." This is the hidden wound behind most overthinking, because when a thought repeats, it's not because you're curious, it's because a part of you is still unconvinced that you're enough. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "Man is the cruelest animal, and the mind, when left unchecked, often turns its cruelty inward." You become judge, jury, and executioner of your own spirit. You pick apart your tone, your laugh, your timing, your silence. You become hyper-aware of every flaw until the flaw becomes your identity. But here's what no one tells you. Overthinking isn't caused by insecurity alone. It's sustained by internalized expectations you were never meant to carry. Maybe someone made you feel like love had to be earned, or safety had to be deserved, and now, anytime something goes wrong, you assume it's proof that you're unworthy. But that's not truth. That's trauma logic. The mind is trying to protect the wounded self, but in doing so, it keeps you stuck in a prison of performance, a place where you're constantly reapplying for your own self-acceptance. But let this land. Overthinking doesn't mean you're broken. It means you were never taught emotional safety. Your mind is doing what it knows, rehearsing, repeating, reviewing, trying desperately to earn peace, because it never learned it could simply receive it. You are not too much. You're carrying too much. There's a difference. And the moment you name the shame is the moment it begins to loosen its grip. Because the truth is, shame thrives in silence, but once spoken, it starts to dissolve. Here's the quiet, almost cruel truth. You can't think your way into peace, because overthinking isn't a thinking problem. It's a safety problem. And safety doesn't live in the mind. It lives in the body. That's why you can be surrounded by love, have the job, the answers, the journal, the plan, the affirmations, the logic, and still spiral at 1:43 a.m. over a text you sent 6 hours ago. Because no matter how sophisticated your thoughts become, your nervous system still remembers what it felt like to be a child with no control, trying to decode moods, silence, rejection. And so you think, and think, and think, not because you don't know enough, but because you never felt safe enough to stop. It's not about fixing what's broken, it's about listening to what's been ignored. That rising anxiety, that's the body saying, something inside me still doesn't feel seen. So you try everything. You journal, you track triggers. You meditate, you intellectualize your trauma like it's an academic thesis, and still the mind returns, because the wound isn't cognitive, it's emotional. The real healing starts the moment you stop chasing clarity and begin offering yourself compassion. You stop dissecting the thought and start sitting with the fear underneath it. You name it, the grief, the loneliness, the moment you felt abandoned but smiled anyway. You hold it, the memory of being too young to understand, but old enough to blame yourself for what was never your fault. You let it move through you, and slowly, very slowly, your mind stops trying to scream for your attention. Because when the body feels safe, the mind finally exhales. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." But he also knew, true strength is not domination. It's not getting over it. It's the strength to be with what is without running, to feel without fixing, to soften without collapsing, to hold the storm without becoming the storm. And sometimes that strength begins not in effort, but in surrender, not in resisting the thought, but in recognizing the wound it's trying to protect. Because peace isn't something you achieve, It's something you return to once your nervous system believes it's safe to arrive. So what now? What do you do once you realize that the voice in your head isn't cruel, it's scared, that your spirals weren't proof you were broken, but proof you were still trying to protect yourself? What do you do with that truth? You stop seeing your overthinking as a flaw to be erased and start seeing it as a signal to be understood. A signal that says, I want to be safe. I want to be seen. I want to be loved without the war inside me. You begin to treat your thoughts not as threats, but as messengers from a younger version of you, one who needed more gentleness than they received. You listen. You learn to speak to yourself in a voice that doesn't echo the people who once misunderstood you. You don't shame the pattern, you name the pain, because that's where the healing begins. Alan Watts once said, "The more we struggle for life as pleasure, the more we are actually killing what we love." And that applies inward too. The more you struggle for peace by controlling everything, the more peace slips through your fingers. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you sit with the discomfort without making it your identity, you reclaim your power, not by force, but by presence. The thought loops may still return. Old habits don't vanish overnight, and that's okay. But now, instead of fighting them, you witness them. You no longer speak to yourself like a problem. You speak like someone worth saving, because you are. Overthinking doesn't define you, it protected you. It kept you safe in a world that once didn't feel safe enough to exist in, freely, fully. But protection is not the same as peace. And now you are allowed to evolve beyond the armor. You are allowed to lay it down. You are allowed to feel something softer, clarity that doesn't come from control, but from connection to your own truth. There is stillness beyond the spiral. There is clarity beyond the chaos. There is you beneath the noise. And you are allowed to feel that, even now, especially now, because once you name the thought, you take back the power. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you remember what it feels like to come home to yourself.